Patreon.com/the Walk Off Podcast. $4 a month gets you in there.
If you're watching this right now and you haven't hit the like button, Billy, get on it. Bug your brother. Tell him to do the same. So, Ben, I don't even really want to get into this, but it is a subject that we probably should touch on. Alek Manoah. And if anyone knew what was wrong, obviously he would already be on the path to fixing it. I know that yesterday on Blair and Barker, they were talking about the fact that, if sending him down might need to be the thing that gets him right, but they don't. I mean, obviously, there's not a lot of options in AAA to bring up to let him go down there and give him some time, right? Like, no one wants to see Casey Lawrence or Tommy Hatch in this starting rotation. They mentioned maybe letting Danny Jansen catch him. That seems like probably the easiest option left to give a try to. Would you be on board with maybe switching up the battery mates there? Or do you think it even matters?
I do kind of fall on the side that I'm not so sure that it matters. I mean, Danny Jansen is a good game caller, don't get me wrong, but Alejandro Kirk's been calling games for Chris Bassett, except for the first game of the season that Danny Jansen called when he got bombed. Mm-hmm. So I don't, in my personal opinion, I don't see the gap as big as I think the majority of people do between the two. I wouldn't be against it because I just think at this point, mixing something up, even if it's not that big of a change, might not be the worst idea. Like, I do see that side of it is just, hey, let's try something different. Give him literally just a new glove to look at, a new guy to talk with, and just see what works out. But a year and a half of Alek Manoah, the reason he kind of is what he is mostly pitching to Alejandro Kirk. I mean, last year he nearly won a Cy Young with Alejandro Kirk. So I'm not against it. I would just caution towards that being like a major point. I think, there's still some of the mechanical stuff and the fact that his slider just isn't being located right now the way that it was. I mean, it really showed up. It showed up a lot this year, but it really showed up obviously in the start against the Yankees where he walked 7 guys. That's just not the guy that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing someone who can throw the ball in the zone with ease, frankly. Even when he was missing his spots, it was most of the time in the zone last year. And right now it just seems like he doesn't have it.
The walks is the big red flag, in my opinion, as well. And I'm kind of with you there, Ben, that I really don't think it's the game calling of Alejandro Kirk. And I don't think anyone within the Blue Jays organization does. I think that if they do switch it up, it's like you said, they're throwing sand at a wall at this point, right? And hoping something sticks. When it comes to Manoah, do you think the fact that he hasn't struggled before is maybe throwing him off a little bit more? It's just one extra thing to deal with.
I mean, I think it's definitely, the hardest the first time that you go through something like this. He does, if you go way back in time, he did struggle for more than a year at West Virginia when he first got there. And it was an interesting time for him. And he goes to the Cape Cod Baseball League, works with Dennis Cook, who was a Mets reliever, a Marlins reliever, Phillies reliever, some other places. He was the pitching coach there. And he teaches Manoah the slider, and all of a sudden it unlocks this monster of a guy. So I do think, he can think back to stuff like that and try and overcome it using that. But at the same time, he's never struggled and had to go up against, the New York Yankees when he's trying to work through his stuff, or the Philadelphia Phillies and Bryce Harper and all those guys. So it's the first time something's gone wrong. I do think that it's the hardest one to get through. I think, if you think back in Blue Jays history, like the first time Roy Halladay struggled, it nearly destroyed his career. I'm not saying that similar thing would happen to Alek Manoah, but I think the first time you go through anything like this, it's going to be the hardest. But if he can get through something like this, which, I mean, I'm sure, there's a lot of years left on his contract and a lot of really good baseball that he's already played. I'm sure he can get through this. And once he does, it could be scary coming up, but certainly it's not, the 30 for 30 or the documentary time of Alek Manoah's career right now. He's kind of working through the roughest patch he's ever had.
Well, obviously, Alek Manoah has been a talking point here on the show, and Adam and I have talked numerous times about where our concern level is. And we're both kind of on the same boat that long-term, we do not have concern for Alek Manoah. I truly do believe genuinely that he is going to come out of this and be, if not as good as last year, very, very close. But I am concerned for right now. Where are you at with your concern level on Alek Manoah?
I would say I'm pretty similar to you guys, to be honest. In the long term, I have very little issues with what's going on. I really just think sometimes you go through those stretches. In the short term, I think the Blue Jays are,
Panic, right?
looking at, kind of if you think about like if they make the playoffs, which I think they really look like they're going to, who's starting game 3 of a potential series? Like I think right now, and it's still 40 games into the season and a lot can change, but you're pretty locked in that Kevin Gausman and Chris Bassett are going to start playoff games for you.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I know Kikuchi has pitched really well so far, but after that, I still think at this point, it's kind of a toss-up. You have two guys who have been immensely successful for a large part of their career in Manoah in a smaller sample size and Barrios, who both have not pitched to their potential recently. And then you have Kikuchi, who's had a really up and down career, but all of a sudden is pitching about as well as he has in a major league uniform and certainly with the Blue Jays. So I do think in the short term, when you're looking at, a playoff outlook, it is concerning because it could take a while for things to get right. Even if Manoah, manages this year to get, more control and start to look more like himself, it does feel like the odds he gets back to peak Alek Manoah during this season, or at least until late in the season, are unlikely just because pitching is so difficult and his bar is so high. So I do think in the fact of looking toward the playoffs, it is a little bit concerning, and you do have to start to think about, how is Jose Barrios pitching on every given week,
Mm-hmm.
or is there, something else that can be done to try and find a third playoff starter?
I mean, obviously the dream is we look back in September and you're back on the show and we're all laughing at the fact we were so concerned
Absolutely
about Alek Manoah. So